Bring her to me, now. Billionaire Victor Harrington's voice cracked through the sterile room, silencing his children and lawyers. I don't care about the company, the will, or the empire. I just need to see her. Why her? One of his sons spat, his voice cracking as Victor Harrington's final breath trembled out the same words again. Bring me, the housekeeper. The room froze, but what no one knew was who she really was. What would you think if a man with everything chose the one person the world ignored? Would you have seen the truth hidden in plain sight? Before we jump in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what kind of story do you crave next? Drop your answer in the comments below. If stories like this grip your heart and refuse to let go, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get into today's story. The hospital room smelled of sterile bleach and expensive flowers, the kind that wilt quickly under fluorescent light. Machines beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that every second was borrowed. Around the bed, his children stood like statues carved from bitterness, impatient, restless, waiting for the end as if it were the final chapter of a business deal. On the bed lay Victor Harrington, billionaire CEO, empire builder, and for decades, a man whose name made competitors tremble. But tonight, he was small. His body was thin beneath the linen sheets, his once booming voice reduced to a hoarse whisper. Only his eyes still carried fire, the eyes of a man who had built towers and crushed rivals, now begging for something no one in the room understood. Father, this isn't the time, his eldest son muttered, adjusting the cufflinks he didn't need to wear in a hospital room. You should be thinking of the will of the company. But Victor's lips parted again, stubborn even in weakness. Bring her. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. His daughters exchanged quick glances, the youngest biting her lip, the eldest narrowing her eyes with suspicion. His lawyer, who stood in the corner clutching a leather briefcase, shifted uncomfortably. The housekeeper. Someone finally whispered, disbelief dripping from the word as if it were an insult. Victor's hand trembled as he tried to raise it. His voice cracked but carried enough strength to echo. Yes, her. Across the city, unaware of the storm her name had just stirred, Amara folded freshly laundered sheets in a modest one-bedroom apartment. Her hands moved with practiced grace, her back slightly bent from years of labor, but her spirit steady. She was in her early 50s, skin rich and warm, hair streaked with gray she wore proudly. She hummed a tune under her breath, a hymn her grandmother used to sing in the villages of Nigeria, softly filling the quiet room. Amara was not extraordinary in the way the world defines it. She had no riches, no degrees framed on walls, no photographs splashed in magazines. But she carried dignity in her every movement. Her neighbors came to her for advice, her church leaned on her strength, and the children in her building called her Mama Amara, because she always carried extra fruit in her bag. To most, she was invisible. To the Harrington family, she had been the help. For 25 years, she had polished their marble floors, cooked their meals, and moved silently in the shadows of their wealth. She remembered birthdays no one thanked her for, picked up after tantrums no one apologized for, and kept secrets that were not hers to keep. Tonight, she sat by her window with a cup of tea, staring out at the city lights. She had not worked for the Harringtons in years, yet sometimes the memories of that mansion came back in fragments. Victor's booming footsteps in the study, the smell of cigars, the sound of doors slamming after arguments. She thought she had left that world behind. She did not yet know that her name had just been spoken in a sterile room by a man she once believed had forgotten her. Back at the hospital, the children erupted. This is ridiculous, snapped Daniel, the eldest son. His tie loosened, his patience gone. He's delirious. We should focus on keeping him comfortable, not entertaining this. Delirious or not, murmured Anna, the middle daughter with sharp eyes. Why would he call for her of all people? She leaned closer to the bed, lowering her voice. Father, what does she have to do with your final hours? Victor's breathing was shallow, but his eyes flared with rare intensity. Everything, he rasped. That single word sent shivers through the room. If you were standing in that hospital room, what would you think? Would you believe his words? Or suspect something more? Let me know in the comments below. The doctor stepped in then, urging calm. He doesn't have much strength left. If this is his wish, it should be honored. But honoring it meant calling a woman who had not stepped into their world in years. And that meant confronting questions no one wanted answered. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as if the city itself sensed the storm about to unfold. And so the stage was set, A billionaire on his deathbed demanding the presence of the one person his family least expected. And a woman living quietly, unaware that her life was about to be pulled back into the shadows of the empire she once served. The silence in the hospital suite was so heavy it felt alive, pressing into every corner. Victor Harrington lay with his eyes half shut, his breath shallow, but when his lips moved again, no one could deny the clarity in his voice. "Bring her," he whispered once more, as though his very soul clung to the demand. The doctor's gaze swept the room. "He's not confused," she said firmly. "His vitals are low, but his mind is lucid. If this is his wish, we cannot ignore it." The air shifted, discomfort flashing across their faces like lightning. "She's a housekeeper," Daniel snapped, his frustration spilling out. "Do you understand what this looks like? What people will say if the press finds out?" Anna's lips curled into a thin line. "Maybe we should ask what she means to him." "No," Daniel growled. "We don't involve outsiders in family matters." But Victor's eyes shot open, startlingly clear, and he coughed until his body shook. The oxygen monitor beeped frantically as the nurse rushed forward, but still he forced the words out between gasps. "She is family." The sentence dropped like a bomb. The room froze. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. His children stared in disbelief, their father's declaration shattering the narrative they'd clung to their whole lives. "Family," whispered the youngest, Lily, her voice trembling. "What do you mean, family?" Victor's chest heaved, his hand clutching at the sheets. His voice was too weak for explanations, but the weight of that one word hung in the air like smoke, seeping into every mind present. Far across Tea City, Amara rinsed her teacup and set it gently on the counter. The night had grown colder, rain tapping softly against the windowpane. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, a sudden chill rippling through her as if someone had whispered her name. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Scams were too common, but something urged her to answer. "Hello, Mrs. Amara?" a professional voice asked. "This is Dr. Patel from St. Mary's Hospital. Victor Harrington has requested to see you. It is urgent." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Victor," she repeated, her throat tightening. It had been years since she'd spoken that name aloud. "Yes. He is very ill. He insists he must see you. We can send a car if needed." Her grip on the phone trembled. Memories came flooding back. Decades of service, long corridors, sharp commands, the silent kindnesses they never spoke of. And then her leaving, quietly, with no farewell. Why now? Why her? She almost said no. She almost ended the call. But then the doctor added softly, "If you wish to say goodbye, it must be tonight." At the hospital, the Harrington children waited tensely as word came that Amara was on her way. "This is absurd," Daniel muttered, pacing the polished floor. "He's humiliating us in his final hours." "Or revealing something you don't want to hear," Anna countered, her eyes narrowing. "What if she knows something we don't?" The lawyer finally spoke up. "If Mr. Harrington's wishes involve her, it may affect his estate. We must be prepared for complications." That sent Daniel into another fury, but his voice blurred into the background as Victor's labored breathing filled the silence again. The billionaire's gaze was fixed on the door, as if sheer willpower could drag her across the city faster. When the elevator finally chimed, everyone turned. The sliding doors opened slowly, and out stepped Amara. She wore no makeup, no jewels, only a simple navy dress and her shawl draped across her shoulders. Her hair was neatly tied back, her steps hesitant yet dignified. She looked smaller than the empire she had once served, but the moment her eyes fell on Victor, the years between them melted away. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if stories like this hook you in seconds, hit that subscribe button now. Tomorrow's story drops, and you do not want to miss it. Now, back to it. The children stared at her as though she were an intruder. But Victor's entire face transformed. His lips curved into a faint smile, his hand lifting weakly toward her. "Amara," he breathed as though the name itself carried life. She froze. Her chest tightened, her heart hammering in her ears. She had prepared herself to see a powerful man, perhaps even to feel bitterness. But here lay a frail human being, stripped of power, reaching out to her with nothing but naked need. The room spun with tension. His children exchanged bewildered glances. their confusion sharpening into suspicion. And in that moment, a truth hung unspoken. This was no ordinary bond. The mystery deepened, the air crackled, and the question echoed louder than ever. Why her? Amara stepped forward slowly, her voice steady but low. I'm here, Mr. Harrington. But Victor's tired smile widened. Not, Mr. Harrington, he whispered. Not with you. Her breath caught. His children's jaws dropped. The machines hummed steadily, recording every fragile beat of the moment. And just like that, the world outside disappeared. It was no longer about wealth, inheritance, or even death. It was about a secret that had lived in silence too long, now clawing its way to the surface in the final hours of a man who had everything, except her. The silence broke like glass. Daniel's voice sliced through the room, sharp and angry. Enough of this nonsense. You, he pointed at Amara with trembling fury. You don't belong here. Amara froze, her back straightening, her dignity intact. She had endured that tone before, years of it, but tonight it cut deeper because of the man lying between them. Sit down, Victor rasped, his weak voice still managing to command the room. His eyes pinned Daniel with the same authority that had once bent governments and CEOs. She stays. Daniel's jaw clenched. Father, you can't. I can, Victor interrupted, coughing hard until the nurse rushed to adjust his oxygen. When the fit passed, he whispered hoarsely, and I will. Anna folded her arms, her gaze darting between her father and Amara. Why her? Why now? Her voice was steady, but a tremor of fear underlined every syllable. Victor's lips parted, but no explanation came. He simply looked at Amara, as if the answer was in her face, not his words. Amara's chest tightened. She had not wanted this. She hadn't asked to be pulled back into this gilded cage of power and brokenness. She should leave. She wanted to leave. But her feet stayed planted. Mr. Harrington, she began, then stopped herself. His eyes had pleaded earlier. Not with you. She swallowed. Victor. Why me? Her words cracked the dam. Lily, the youngest daughter, surged forward. Yes, why you? He has children, grandchildren, a legacy to protect. Why would he call for a housekeeper instead of his own blood? The venom in her voice stung, but it was not unfamiliar. Amara had lived with those words her entire career. Housekeeper. The help. Invisible. Still, she held her ground. I don't know, Amara said softly, though part of her feared she did. Perhaps you should ask him, not me. Victor's fingers twitched toward her, but his strength failed. The truth seemed locked behind his weakening body, yet his eyes burned as if to say, you know. Daniel stepped closer, towering over Amara. Whatever this is, gratitude, guilt, something else, it ends now. You won't manipulate him in his final hours. She turned her gaze on him, calm but firm. I've never manipulated anyone in this family. I cleaned your messes, I cooked your meals, I watched you all grow up while no one saw me. If I were after anything, I would have taken it years ago. The room went still. Her voice carried no malice, only truth, and it unsettled them. Daniel faltered, but pride held his tongue. Anna leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. Then prove it. Walk away. If you have no business here, leave. Amara's heart pounded. That was what she had wanted when the call first came, to say no, to stay invisible, safe. But something in Victor's gaze anchored her. His eyes pleaded, desperate, more human than she'd ever seen them. She couldn't leave. Not yet. I will not leave him like this, she said firmly. Not when he called for me. The airs erupted. Unbelievable. Daniel snapped. She thinks she's one of us. I never said that, Amara interrupted, her voice rising for the first time. I am not one of you. But I am someone he asked for. And if you truly cared about your father's peace, you would respect his wish. Her words struck deep. For a moment, even the lawyer shifted uneasily, glancing at the children as though weighing who was truly in the wrong. Victor coughed violently, and the room fell silent again. His hand clawed at the sheets, reaching weakly. Amara stepped forward instinctively, taking his frail fingers in hers. His hand was cold, trembling, but the moment their skin touched, his breathing steadied. The children stared in stunned silence. It wasn't just a wish. It wasn't delirium. It was something deeper, something none of them could yet name. That night, after the children reluctantly left to argue in hushed tones outside, Amara sat by Victor's bedside, her mind a storm. Why had she stayed? Why hadn't she walked away like she promised herself years ago? Perhaps because despite everything, the loneliness, the years of invisibility, this was the first time someone had chosen her. And not just someone. Him. She clenched her hands in her lap, heart pounding with emotions she wasn't ready to name. If you were Amara, would you have stayed in that room, or walked away forever? Be honest, I want to know what you'd do. But outside the door, Daniel's voice was a hiss. We can't let her get close. If she's here when he dies, people will talk. The board, the press, it will ruin everything. Anna whispered back. And what if it's already too late? What if she knows something we don't? Their father's choice had planted a seed of doubt, and that seed would grow into suspicion, conflict, and revelation. For now, Amara sat quietly at his side, unaware of the storm waiting just beyond the door. She thought she was here to say goodbye, but what lay ahead was far more complicated. And it was only the beginning. The door clicked shut. The hushed voices of his children faded down the hallway, leaving only the steady hum of machines and the shallow rhythm of Victor's breathing. Amara sat rigid in the chair beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The silence pressed in on her. Heavy, suffocating. She had spent decades in the Harrington mansion keeping to corners, moving unnoticed. Now there was no corner to hide in. It was just her. And him. Victor stirred weakly, his head tilting toward her. His lips parted, but no words came. Only a rasp. His hand lifted shakily from the sheets, as if reaching for something he couldn't quite grasp. Amara hesitated. Then, slowly, she slid her hand into his. His fingers, frail and trembling, tightened around hers with surprising strength. You stayed, he whispered, barely audible. She swallowed hard. You asked me to. His lips curved faintly, almost a smile. They don't understand. No, she said softly, they don't. For a long while, the silence stretched. Yet it wasn't empty. It was heavy with all the things unspoken between them. The years, the secrets, the invisible bond forged in shadows of wealth and silence. Amara shifted uncomfortably. Victor, why me? After all this time. Why would you call for me? His eyes opened wider, clearer for a moment. He looked at her not as the help, not as the woman who had carried trays and folded linens, but as someone he knew. Because, he rasped, voice breaking on the edges, you're the only one who ever saw me. Her breath caught. The words hung between them, raw and unguarded. Memories rushed back unbidden. Nights when she had passed his study, and found him hunched over ledgers long after the house was asleep. Mornings when she had found empty glasses by the fireplace, the faint smell of whiskey and regret in the air. Times when he'd looked at his children with pride in public but with quiet despair in private. She had seen it all. And she had kept silent. Amara's voice trembled. I was just doing my job. No, Victor whispered, his eyes burning with insistence. You cared. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to push the words away. But deep down she knew he was right. She had cared. She had cared too much. He coughed, his body convulsing with the effort. Instinctively, Amara rose, adjusting his pillow, holding the cup of water to his lips. Their eyes met as he drank, fragile and human in her care. When he settled back, weaker now, his hand found hers again. Stay until the end. Her heart twisted. She should have said no. It wasn't her place. His children would despise her more. She had her own life, her own dignity to protect. But looking into his eyes, she found herself whispering, I'll stay. Imagine being Amara, alone in that room with the man who once towered over the world, now fragile, asking you to stay. Would you have the strength to sit there, knowing the storm waiting outside? The night deepened. The nurse came and went. The machines hummed. And still, Amara remained. She told herself it was duty, compassion, habit. But deep down she knew it was something else. Something unspoken that had lived in her chest for years. Victor drifted in and out of sleep, his hand never letting go of hers. At times he mumbled fragments. Names, regrets, apologies meant for ghosts. Once he whispered, Should have chosen differently, should have. Amara leaned closer. Chosen what? His eyes fluttered open, glassy but locked on her. You. Her breath hitched. Heat surged through her chest, painful and tender all at once. She wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as delirium. But the way he looked at her, clear, certain, unashamed, left no room for doubt. For the first time, Amara realized this wasn't just about closure. This was about a truth neither of them had dared speak in decades. And now, with death pressing closer, there was no more time for silence. Outside the door, his children argued in hushed tones about wills and legacies, blind to what was unfolding inside. They feared what Amara represented. But what they didn't know, what they could not yet imagine, was that the bond between their father and this woman was far more dangerous than money, because it was built on truth. And truth, once spoken, could not be undone. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if stories like this hook you in seconds, hit that subscribe button now. Tomorrow's story drops, and you do not want to miss it. Now, back to it. The words lingered in the sterile air like a forbidden spell. Amara sat frozen, her hand still in his, her pulse hammering in her ears. Truth. What truth could possibly exist between a billionaire and his housekeeper? Victor's breathing grew shallow again, but his eyes refused to close. He was holding on, not to life but to the moment, to her. There's something they don't know, he whispered. His gaze flicked toward the door, where faint shadows of his children moved beneath the hallway light. They must never. But you deserve to. Amara stiffened. Victor, don't. You need to rest. But he gripped her hand tighter, surprising her with the strength that came from sheer will. No. I've rested long enough. Too long. His words dragged her back. Decades to a younger man. She remembered the Victor who strode through the mansion in tailored suits, eyes sharp as knives, voice carrying like thunder. He was the one who never bent, never faltered. But even then, when he thought no one was looking, she had seen cracks. Like the night he stood by the piano, staring at a framed photograph of his late wife, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. Or the morning he sat alone in the garden, long before anyone else was awake, clutching a letter until the edges tore in his grip. She had noticed. But she had never asked. Because some lines weren't meant to be crossed. Now, he pulled her closer. His voice rasped, fragile but insistent. I wasn't always this man, he began. Before the empire. Before the boardrooms and the power. I was just a boy who lost everything too young. A boy who learned to hide behind walls of glass and steel. But you, his lips trembled. You broke through without even trying. Amara's heart tightened. She shook her head. Victor, I only worked here. I washed floors. I folded clothes. He gave a faint, bitter laugh. And yet, you were the only one who saw me bleeding. For a moment, silence fell again. But it wasn't empty. It was full of memories, secrets pressing against the surface. Amara dared to ask softly, what is it you never told them? His eyes glistened unguarded. That once. I loved someone. Truly. Not for the way she looked on my arm, not for the alliances it brought me, but because she made me feel human. Her breath caught. He wasn't speaking about his late wife. She knew that instinctively. This was something else. His lips trembled as he forced the name out, a name she hadn't heard in years. Lydia. Amara blinked, stunned. Lydia. The young woman who had worked in the Harrington household long before Amara. A maid who had left suddenly. Whispers swirling in the air but never confirmed. She was fire, Victor said, his voice slipping into memory. She laughed at my arrogance. She saw through my money. She loved me, I think. But I was a coward. I chose reputation. I chose wealth. And I let her go. A hollow silence followed. Amara felt her throat close. Lydia. What happened to her? Victor's eyes darkened. She had a daughter. The room spun. Amara's hand slipped from his for a moment, but he clutched it back desperately. A daughter, she repeated, her voice shaking. He nodded, tears finally sliding down his withered cheeks. Yes, a daughter I never claimed. A daughter I abandoned because I was too afraid of scandal. Too afraid to face the truth. Amara. His breath hitched. That daughter was you. The world collapsed into silence. Amara sat back, her chest tightening, her vision blurring. Her lips parted but no words came. The monitor beside them beeped steadily, as if mocking the chaos exploding inside her. No. The word slipped out in a whisper. That's not possible. Victor's eyes locked onto hers, pleading. It is. Lydia was your mother. I saw her strengthen you every time you walked into this house. I thought I could ignore it. Pretend. But I couldn't. Not at the end. Her body trembled, fury and grief colliding in her veins. Memories of her childhood flooded back, the absence of a father, the whispers in her neighborhood, her mother's silence. Had it all been this? She stood abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. So that's why you called me here? To dump this on me now when you're dying? His eyes glistened, breaking. No. I called you because I couldn't leave without telling you the truth. Because I owed you that much. Amara's heart twisted violently. For years, she had been invisible in this house. For years, she had scrubbed its marble floors, carried its secrets in silence. And now, suddenly, she was part of the biggest secret of all. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. You had a choice, Victor. You could have claimed me. You could have stood up. And you didn't. His lips quivered. I know. And I regret it every day. The words fell between them like shards of glass. Too little, too late, yet impossible to ignore. If you were Amara, hearing this confession, that the billionaire you worked for all your life was your father, would you forgive him? Or would you walk away forever? Victor slumped back, his strength spent. His breathing was shallow now, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Amara stood trembling, torn between rage and grief, between the girl who had longed for a father and the woman who had learned to survive without one. The truth had been spoken, and it could not be undone. But what she did with it, that was still in her hands. Amara stood at the foot of the bed, her fists clenched at her sides, her chest heaving as though she'd just run miles. The monitor beeped steadily, each tone slicing through the thick silence. Victor's eyes fluttered open again, heavy with exhaustion but searching, always searching for hers. You don't have to accept me, he whispered, his voice so fragile she had to lean in to hear. But I need you to know. I didn't bring you here for forgiveness. Only truth. Amara's throat tightened. The fury that had flared inside her moments ago was still there, simmering, but beneath it was something even more dangerous. Grief. Her lips parted. Do you know what it was like, Victor? Growing up without a name to cling to? Watching other children hold their father's hands while I wondered why mine never came. Her voice cracked, and a tear slipped free before she could stop it. Victor's hand trembled upward, reaching, faltering in midair. She hesitated. Then, almost against her own will, she took it. His fingers closed around hers, weak but steady. I do know, he rasped, eyes glistening. Because I grew up the same way. Father gone. Mother broken. I swore I'd never abandon my own. And yet, I became him. The raw confession cut deeper than she expected. For the first time, Amara saw not the titan of industry, not the master of the mansion, but a man, frail, flawed, and drowning in his own regrets. The silence that followed wasn't hostile this time. It was fragile, like glass that could shatter with the wrong word. Amara pulled the chair closer, sinking down. She hadn't realized until now how much her legs were shaking. I hated you, she admitted quietly. Every time I cleaned this house, I hated you. For what you represented. For the life you had while my mother worked herself sick. But still, when you looked right through me, I wanted you to see me. I wanted you to say something. Victor's lips trembled into something like a smile. I saw you. Every day. That was the torment. I saw you and I stayed silent. Because I was a coward. Her chest ached. She should have pulled away, should have let him sit with that guilt alone. But instead, she whispered. Why now, Victor? Why wait until the end? He squeezed her hand weakly. Because only at the end do we learn what matters. For the first time, tears rolled freely down Amara's face. She didn't wipe them out. She let them fall, raw and unhidden. And in that moment, Victor's eyes softened, as though her tears washed something clean inside him. Amara, he whispered, her name a fragile plea. I can't give you back the years. But if you'll let me, I want to give you these last days. Not as a master and housekeeper. Not as a billionaire and a servant. But as a father. And his daughter. Her breath shuddered in her chest. The word daughter cracked something open inside her she had spent a lifetime locking away. The hours blurred after that. Victor drifted in and out of consciousness. But whenever he woke, his eyes searched for her. And every time she was still there. They spoke in fragments. Half-whispered stories, half-truths untangled. He told her of the first time he saw her walking through the mansion as a girl, carrying linens twice her size with quiet dignity, and how he had wanted to stop her, to tell her, but fear froze his tongue. She told him of her mother's laughter, how Lydia would hum while cooking, and how her eyes dimmed with exhaustion each night. He confessed how he had kept a photograph of Lydia hidden in his study for decades, a secret shrine to the woman he loved but couldn't claim. She confessed how she had once dreamed of confronting him, of spitting the truth in his face, but had buried the dream under years of silence. Each word didn't erase the past, but it wove something new between them, fragile and real. At one point, Victor's hand trembled toward the nightstand drawer. Open it, he urged. Inside lay a small, worn photograph. A young woman, Lydia, smiling with the sun in her hair. Amara's heart clenched at the sight. I kept it, he said, voice breaking. Through everything. Even when I built walls higher than mountains, I couldn't let her go. And when I looked at you, it was like she was standing in front of me again. Amara traced the edge of the photo with trembling fingers. For the first time in her life, she felt her mother's absence soften. It was as if the woman she lost had been quietly present all along. The room grew quiet again, but this silence wasn't suffocating. It was almost gentle, holding space for what had finally been spoken. Amara leaned back, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She hadn't realized how heavy her anger had been until she let pieces of it go. Victor's eyes fluttered shut, his chest rising and falling shallowly. For a moment she thought he'd slipped away. But then, in the faintest voice, he whispered, "Thank you." Her lips parted. For what? For staying. For letting me be your father. Even if only for tonight. Amara's tears fell silently, but this time she didn't fight them. She simply held his hand tighter, a silent answer. If you were in Amara's place, would you let go of the anger to spend those last hours in peace? Or would the past be too heavy to forgive? For the first time in her life, Amara didn't feel like the invisible housekeeper. She didn't feel like a servant standing in the shadows. She felt seen. She felt claimed. And though the night was long, for the first time, it didn't feel empty. The morning light crept into the hospital room, painting everything in shades of pale gray. Amara's eyes were still red from tears, but for once they weren't burning with anger. They were soft, almost tender, as she watched Victor drift in and out of shallow sleep. She adjusted his blanket carefully, the photograph of Lydia still resting on the nightstand between them like a silent witness. The door burst open. Enough. Alexander's voice cracked like a whip. His siblings followed close behind, their expressions sharp, eyes blazing with suspicion and fury. Amara shot to her feet, instinctively shielding the frail man in the bed, though she had no right to. "What are you doing here again?" One of the daughters spat, her manicured hand trembling as she pointed at Amara. "You've poisoned him with your presence long enough." Victor stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "Stop," he rasped, weak but commanding. "Leave her. Leave her." Alexander's laugh was bitter, cold. "Father, do you even hear yourself? She's a housekeeper. A nobody. And suddenly, at the end, she gets your hand, your time, your trust? What about us?" Amara's chest tightened. She tried to speak, but Victor lifted his trembling hand. "She is not nobody," he whispered. The words, tender and raw, cut deeper than any shout. The siblings froze, their expressions twisting from rage into confusion. "What do you mean?" one daughter pressed. "Who is she?" Victor's lips parted, but his voice faltered. He turned to Amara, eyes pleading for her to decide, to speak. The silence stretched, until Amara's lips trembled and the truth spilled out. "I'm his daughter." The air shattered. Gasps filled the room. Alexander staggered back as though struck. His sister's face drained of color. Another sibling swore under their breath. You, Alexander hissed, his eyes narrowing to slits. You expect us to believe this? That our father had a secret child with the help? Amara's face burned, but her spine straightened. Believe what you want. He told me himself. Convenient, the other daughter sneered. A deathbed confession no one else heard. And you, of all people, stand to gain everything if it's true. Amara's hand shook, but not from fear this time. From fury. I never asked for his money. I never asked for his name. All I wanted was the truth. Victor groaned, trying to sit up, but his body betrayed him. He coughed violently, blood flecking his lips. The siblings rushed forward, not to comfort, but to cage him in, their voices rising in accusation. She's manipulating you. She's after the inheritance. You've always had a weakness for strays, father, but this is madness. Amara's chest ached as she watched his children tear into the man she had only just begun to forgive. She wanted to scream, to silence them, but part of her feared they were right. Had she been selfish to stay? Had she taken something from them that was never hers to hold? Victor's voice cut through the chaos, broken but firm. Enough. His body trembled with the effort. She is mine. My blood. My truth. And I will not leave this world without saying it. The room froze. Tears stung Amara's eyes again. For all the years she had longed to hear those words, she had never imagined they would come like this, torn from a dying man's lungs in a room of enemies. Alexander's jaw tightened, fury spilling from his eyes. If this is true, then she's nothing but a stain on this family's name. An embarrassment. Do you hear me, father? A mistake. Amara flinched. The word mistake pierced deeper than she expected. Her heart clenched, her grip on Victor's hand faltering. Victor reached for her, but in that moment she couldn't bear it. She pulled away. The monitor beeped faster, Victor's eyes widening in panic as she stepped back. Amara, please. But she couldn't. Not with his children's venom still echoing in her ears. Not with the weight of years pressing down on her chest. Her voice broke as she whispered, Maybe they're right. Maybe I should never have stayed. And before he could answer, she turned and fled from the room. The door slammed behind her, the sterile hallway stretching endlessly ahead. Her steps echoed as tears blurred her vision, her chest burning with every breath. Inside, Victor's children swarmed him, their voices a storm of accusations and threats. But the damage was already done. The fragile bond they had built through the night had cracked, shattered by the weight of old wounds and new betrayals. If you were Amara, would you have walked out of that room when his children turned against you? Or would you have stayed and fought for the truth? In the hallway, Amara pressed her back to the cold wall, her sobs muffled by her trembling hands. She had wanted to believe redemption was possible. She had wanted to believe that truth could heal. But now, with the weight of the Harrington children's scorn and the echo of the word mistake seared into her heart, all she felt was the same thing she had carried her entire life, alone. Amara sat in the dimly lit hospital chapel, her hands clasped so tightly they ached. The silence pressed in on her, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. She had run until her legs trembled, until her chest felt hollow, but still the word wouldn't leave her head. Mistake. She had heard it whispered before. In school. In the streets. In the tired sighs of the woman who raised her. She thought she had grown numb to it, armored against the sting. But hearing it now, from the lips of the man's true children, cut deeper than ever. Had she been wrong to believe him? Had she been a fool to think a dying man's truth could rewrite a lifetime of lies? She buried her face in her hands, trembling. God, what am I supposed to do? Meanwhile, back in his room, Victor Harrington lay pale and gasping, the weight of silence pressing heavier than his illness. His children had left in a storm of whispered arguments, already circling the estate like vultures. But it wasn't his empire he thought of. Not the fortune, nor the towers, nor the name etched on glass. It was her. The way she had sat beside him, softening the edges of his regret. The way Lydia's eyes had looked back at him through hers. The way she had pulled her hand away when she needed him most. Amara, he whispered into the empty room. His voice cracked, frail but desperate. Don't leave me like this. Not when I've finally found you. His chest ached, Not from disease but from fear. Fear that she would never return. For decades, he had built walls, shutting out love in the pursuit of power. But now, with death near, the choice lay clear before him. Die with pride or die with love. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he prayed. Not for life, not for wealth, just for one more chance. Back in the chapel, Amara lifted her head as footsteps approached. It was Sister Miriam, the hospital chaplain. Her presence gentle as a whisper. She sat beside Amara without a word, letting the silence breathe before she finally spoke. "You're carrying something heavy." Amara swallowed hard, her voice raw. "I don't belong here. They made that clear. And maybe they're right. Maybe. I was never meant to belong anywhere." Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if stories like this hook you in seconds, hit that subscribe button now. Tomorrow's story drops, and you do not want to miss it. Now, back to it. The sister studied her quietly, then said, "And yet, he called for you. Not once. Not twice. But again and again." Amara's chest tightened. "People don't call for those they don't love," Sister Miriam added softly. "You can run from that truth if you want, but I think your heart already knows the choice you have to make." Amara stared at her hands. The choice. Stay and risk breaking all over again. Leave and carry regret for the rest of her life. Her heart warred with her scars, her fear of rejection clashing with the memory of his trembling voice calling her his blood, his truth. She rose slowly, her legs unsteady, but her resolve firming with every step. Victor stirred when the door creaked open. He blinked through the blur of high weakening vision, his heart lurching when he saw her silhouette. "You came back," he whispered, relief flooding his face. Amara stepped inside, her voice quiet but steady. "I almost didn't. Because of them," he rasped. It wasn't a question. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "They think I'm a mistake. That I don't belong." Victor's frail hand reached out, trembling. "Then they're blind. Because you are the only thing in this room that ever truly belonged to me." The words hit her like a tide, breaking through the fear she had carried for years. She sank into the chair beside him, tears streaming unchecked. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be your daughter when the world is against it." His hand squeezed hers, weak but sure. "Then don't do it for the world. Do it for us. For Lydia. For the time we have left." Silence filled the room, Evie but alive. Amara's tears fell onto their joined hands as she realized the truth. This wasn't about wealth, legacy, or even bloodlines. It was about choice. Choosing to love even when it hurt. Choosing to stay even when it was hard. Choosing to believe, even when doubts screamed louder. She lifted her eyes, meeting his, and for the first time since walking into that hospital, she let her heart answer. "I'll stay." Victor exhaled, a shudder of peace settling into his frail frame. "Then I can go without fear." Amara shook her head fiercely, gripping his hand tighter. "Not yet. Not until I say what I came back to say." He smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes wet. "Then say it, daughter." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I forgive you." Would you have stayed in that room, knowing the world was against you? Or would you have walked away forever to protect your heart? In that quiet hospital room, with monitors beeping steadily and the world outside pressing on, two broken souls made their choice. Not for wealth, not for recognition, but for love. And though the hours ahead would bring more pain, more resistance, and the shadow of death itself, one truth had finally been spoken aloud. They had chosen each other. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the hospital room, painting soft stripes across the bed where Victor Harrington lay. His breathing was shallow, but his expression carried a serenity Amara had never seen before. It was as if, by choosing each other in that fragile moment, the years of regret and loneliness had finally loosened their grip. Amara sat beside him, her hand still clasped in his. She had dozed lightly through the night, refusing to let go even once. The storm of doubt from his children still lingered like smoke, but in this room, it felt distant, muted against the steady heartbeat of love she had reclaimed. Victor stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "You stayed," he whispered. She leaned closer, smiling through her exhaustion. "I told you I would." He searched her face, every line and shadow. You remind me so much of her. Of Lydia. But you're not just her. You're stronger. Amara's throat tightened. Because of you. The door opened quietly, and to Amara's surprise, Daniel, Victor's eldest son, stepped in. His expression was different now, stripped of arrogance, replaced with something closer to weariness. He paused, taking in the sight of his father holding the housekeeper's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Amara," he said quietly, almost respectfully. "May I speak to him?" She hesitated, then nodded, gently placing Victor's hand back on the sheets before standing. Daniel moved closer, his voice low but trembling. "Father, I was wrong," he admitted, struggling. "You were right. She belongs here. She always did." His voice cracked as he looked toward Amara. "I just didn't want to lose what little of you I had left." Victor smiled faintly, resting his weak hand on Daniel's arm. "Son, you never lose by sharing love. Only by hoarding it." Daniel bowed his head, tears slipping free, and in that moment, the fracture between father and son softened. Not healed fully, but no longer breaking. Hours later, the monitors beeped slower, each sound pulling Amara's chest tighter. Victor's breaths grew faint, but his gaze never left hers. "Promise me something," he whispered. "Anything," she said, gripping his hand desperately. "Don't let this name, this fortune, define you. Let love define you. That's the legacy I should have left behind." Her tears spilled freely as she nodded. "I promise." His lips curved into the smallest smile. "Good, then I can go at peace." And with one last exhale, one last flicker of strength, Victor Harrington slipped quietly from this world. Amara pressed her forehead to his hand, her sobs muffled against his skin, as the monitor fell silent. The funeral that followed drew the powerful and the curious, reporters buzzing about the billionaire's mysterious last request. But for Amara, it wasn't about headlines. She stood in a simple black dress, her heart still raw, but her spirit steadier than ever before. Daniel and his siblings, though still uneasy, approached her after the service. This time there was no venom, only quiet acknowledgement. "You were his choice," Daniel said softly, extending a hand. Maybe now we can choose better too." She took his hand, not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that came from forgiveness. Weeks later, Amara returned to her small house, the familiar creak of the door greeting her. Nothing about her life looked different. No sudden fortune, no mansion, no glittering title. But everything inside her had changed. She no longer carried the weight of being unwanted, of being invisible. She carried her father's last words, etched into her heart. "Let love define you." Sitting by her kitchen window, she opened a worn journal she had kept for years, its pages filled with questions about her place in the world. For the first time, she wrote an answer. "I belong." If you were Amara, faced with a dying man's confession and the scorn of his family, would you have chosen forgiveness, or walked away forever? Tell us in the comments below. Amara closed the journal, her tears softer now, not from sorrow but from release. Victor Harrington may have left the world, but he left her something far greater than wealth, the courage to love, and the truth that she had always been worthy of it. And for the first time in her life, Amara smiled, not as a housekeeper, not as an outcast, but as a daughter who had finally come home.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, the next one will hit even deeper. It's more gripping, more unexpected, and waiting for you right now. Don't hesitate. Click the video on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.